Do you plan a series out in advance, or when did you decide? I decided that my first novel would only be a standalone. I never planned or anticipated to write a series. And sometimes that's okay. You can just have one story and have it be self contained, and that is a beginning, middle, and conclusion that is satisfactory for yourself. What had happened was when I started doing more beta readers and getting their reader reports and inline comments, there was a common theme, which was three characters in particular were super, super interesting. I mean, all my characters are interesting, but three in particular, namely my pillar of justice, my victim, and my gray character, were so interesting that everyone wanted to know more and more about them. So I had always said, no, it's just a standalone. But when I was reviewing and re-editing and, going through my manuscript again and again, I realized, like, okay, so if I were to do something, what would a story look like for this character? Would it be an origin story? Would it be like year one? Would it be year two? Would it be like 5 years post novel? So then I stayed up one night tossing and turning for a very important interview. And then I thought, oh, this is a great idea. And so I had written then the prequel to this novel. And I was like, okay, like that's enough, calm down. And then I realized, like, oh, what about continuation? Like, where does the story leave off in book one? Who's left? Who has survived? What would their story look like in the future? So it's a roundabout way of saying I didn't plan for it, but it just naturally occurred because the characters themselves were not finished telling their story, if that makes sense. And I do think every character inherently has their own story to say, whether they're the main character, the baddie, the antagonist, the villain, what have you. Every story, every character has a beginning, middle, and end. And it just so happens that the three characters, they didn't get a conclusion. Like one of the characters actually, by the end of book one, it had been their climax, had been like the rising action. So we don't get to see them come down from it, get to see them heal or recover. So that's something I'm really trying to focus on in book three. Yeah, I mean, I also like planned out, so I'm also doing another work in project WIP, and it's a fantasy, low fantasy, true heir to the throne TV show that I've been working on kind of on and off for the past 5-ish years. That one I planned to make it like a series because it was just a lot of characters, a lot of world building, and a lot of plot points that would not be contained within 13 episodes. So I guess it depends on you and your writing style. I somehow was able to bring in themes and plot devices from book one into book two and three. And I didn't realize when I was writing it, but the world that I had created, Seal City, was so vast that you could tell tens of hundreds of stories about the characters in the city without meaning to in book one. I had just based it on Toronto. I was like, yeah, Chinatown, yeah, Little Italy, yeah, Harborfront, cool. But every area and district and person, like, there's just so much you want to know. Like, one of my characters, I didn't really give them like an origin. I was like, well, they just kind of existed. Like, theater of the mind, like, let the reader imagine what their world would look like without me saying, oh, this is their name, this is how many parents they have who are alive. Like, I'm not doing that. I want people to input like their own ideas and stories onto these characters. Lo and behold, this character has an entire book dedicated to them. So, and even now, as I'm wrapping up book three, which is crazy, I'm thinking, I'm like, hey, what other stories can I tell about these characters? Or like a side character that no one really thought about, but like they are inherently interesting. And I think that's the point. You have to make interesting characters. You can't just write, John Smith was a magician. No, like what kind? Like, does he have a dark history? Does he want to use magic shows for charitable goods? Like, what about him makes him worth reading? And that's something I really struggled with in book one, is that I will admit one of my characters is rather weak. And I think that's because I just don't relate to them as much for some reason. Kind of like I don't like them, which is very weird because I created them. I should like them, but I don't. So as a writer, make sure you care about your characters, because if you care, Therefore, the reader will care, and that will show. Yeah, I hope this answers your question in a very long way. But yeah, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It depends on the kind of story and the characters and lifestyle and work-life balance you would like to have. Yeah, I hope you guys like this longer format. I'm trying it out. I'm doing my best, but let me know. Thanks.